very warm welcome to a special showing coming from the south of France, and this is my must-do interview whenever we visit the Cannes
You say that to
Lions.
everybody you interview.
No, you can check.
In the
I
Media
can show
Monks,
you the footage.
in the Media Monks Cafe. We've just gone into the cafeteria business.
And I'm interviewing none other than Martin Sorrell. It is a ritual in Cannes, and I'm hoping that I'm going to get something exciting, something controversial.
Ritual slaughter.
As I wrap up the Cannes Lions 2022. So it's been an interesting Cannes Lions. I'm interested
in... A lot of revenge spending.
It's a revenge Cannes.
A lot of people back spending shed loads.
The gutter bars bursting from the seams every night, including day
I don't know what the attendance is in comparison to... I mean, award entries are down.
18%. Yeah.
18%, okay. And what about number of people here?
I don't think that's accurate, because a lot of people have come in and not actually
gone into the festival. There's been a lot of that where they don't go into the festival.
They just network in and around.
Sounds like Greenpeace is out there.
I saw. Did you hear about that?
I've heard about it. Yes, when they chained themselves. they posed. It's quite funny. They posed as firemen or firewomen. And there was a fire engine that pulled up, and they put the mobile ladder right to the top. They quickly climbed up the ladder and chained themselves to the railings.
Amazing.
Yes, they've made
big
impact.
Creative Effectiveness Award.
Well, maybe they should enter it for next year's award. Experiential award. Yeah.
But anyway, so it's been interesting because I've spoken to a lot of global voices. Everything seems to be hunky-dory.
Everything's wonderful, isn't it? It's amazing.
It seems like, at least that's what they're saying.
It almost feels like January the 1st, not July the 1st. Yeah.
And it's also become a very geeky and tech.
It always has been, Sonali. Where have you been? I mean, if we go back 2 or 3 years, tech-dominated. I mean, data-driven, tech-driven creativity at best, right? So all those creatives who deny the existence of data and technology probably would be absolutely shell-shocked.
A lot of Web3, a lot of crypto, a lot of NFTs.
Yeah, maybe crypto coming under a little bit of pressure. I think there's this distinction between blockchain, which I at my age can understand just about, but crypto I don't get.
What about NFTs?
Yes, I do, in volume. I think the top end is a little bit more difficult. There will be top end NFTs, I mean, low volume, high price, but I think, make a bad analogy, cigarette cards, the old thing, those cards you used to collect, baseball cards and soccer cards.
Yes.
I think at the high volume, low price, I think there's a big place for it there, but we're doing a lot of work. When I say a lot of work, if I bundle together all the meta, crypto, NFT work, blockchain work, this year it'll probably be about $30 to $40 million. So it'll be 10% of our incremental spend this year. But of the 1.2, 1.3 billion that we have this year, which the market's expecting, it's 3 or 4%.
Okay, so that's the conversation I've had. I'm interested in asking you. Do you think there's are we all groping in the dark as an industry?
I don't know whether groping in the dark is the right analogy to use in this day and age. No, listen, everybody was coming down to Cannes. They're not going to say that life is going to be terrible. Mark Pritchard has said, actually, he's acknowledged it really in a way, because what he said is, double up or double down in terms of spend, that the companies that do well in recession or in slower growth, those that spend come out a bit faster. But I'd have to say that, as I look at the balance of this year and into the next 2 years, that, life is not going to be easy, to put it, English understatement. And whatever the holding companies say, I mean, their media units are talking about 8% growth this year or 7%, and ironically, they're talking about only 5 to 6%. So there's a 200 or 300 basis point delta between what their people are saying and what they're saying. But look, and their forecasts for the industry of 7 or 8% are roughly half analog and half digital, a bit more digital. But essentially, at the end of the day, clients don't tell you before they cut that they're going to cut. They tell you either 1 minute to midnight or 1 minute after midnight. They don't like to give agencies bad news. They want to keep us motivated, quite rightly, our people motivated. So we are probably the last to know. And whatever people say, I mean, we did 34% in Q1 of this year, like for like. We're talking about 25% for the year, which having done 34%, we should be able to do 25% for the year, and we're looking for that over 3 years. The market just doesn't go with it. So, you know, whatever you say, I won't use this crude analogy, as it came into my mind, but I won't use it. But essentially, it's just not going to work. The atmosphere and the environment, the economic environment, is so tough. I mean, if we were having this conversation January the 1st, it'd be totally different. Worldwide GDP growth is now forecast at probably under 3. 6 months ago, it was 4 to 5. Advertising growth was, certainly digital growth was 15 to 20%. Now Michael Nathanson, who we follow very closely, probably one of the best analysts, forecasts 10 to 15, and digital spend probably through to 25, growing at that rate, 10 to 15% per annum. And digital as a proportion of total global ad spends, last year 750 billion, probably going to go from 65% to 70 or 75% by 2025. So, and then advertising as a proportion of GDP going from 1% to 1.5%, but totally driven by digital. So free to air, radio, TV, magazine, traditional outdoor, all either flat, some down, but either up a little bit or flat in absolute terms. So digital is driving the growth in advertising as a proportion of GDP. So that's the sort of overall reality that we all see. We're a small factor, a growing factor, but a small factor in the purely digital area. I think we feel pretty comfortable with doubling the size of the company organically over 3 years, which we've done over the last 2-3 year plans. So we've now we're in the midst of filling out the 22 to 24 plan. So I think it's manageable, but when you get back to the overall industry, there's going to be some challenging times.
Are you suggesting we are going in for hard times, we're going in for a recession?
Well, everybody's nervous. Even Elon Musk is nervous. Sort of says it could be. The balance. And there are people out there, Goldman and J.P. Morgan, who say recessionary probabilities are a third, maybe even higher than that, 40%. Now, if the world is going to grow next year at 1.5% to 2%, it means that some parts, maybe India, are going to grow at 3 or 4, and some parts, maybe in the UK, are going to be 0 and 1, or maybe even worse. Now, a recession is 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, so we have to see how that shakes out. But I think the odds are there will be parts of the world in recession. There will be parts that will be different. To use an investment analogy, given everything that's going on, so let's be clear about what's going on. Withdrawal of stimulus after COVID. Interest rate rises as a result. Inflation rises as a result of stimulus and supply side and demand side difficulties and supply chain difficulties. The war on our continent looks as though it's going to be a long one.
Yes.
And even if there's a bad peace or a good peace, as the people say, will Vladimir Putin, if he's still there, will he continue with the same policy? Maybe regroup and then go again. We've seen it in the Crimea. I mean, this is not new news. President Putin had been signaling what he's going to do since probably the early part of the millennium, from 2000 onwards. So I think and then finally COVID lockdowns in China and all the other things, climate change affecting India severely, and as many other places as well. So you put all that together, it's likely to be tough for the balance of this year. And going into, I would say, 23 and 24, I think the only thing that will shake us out of this where we are is the political cycle. So the American election will be in 24.
Who are you betting on, Trump?
Well, let's back up for a minute. You have the midterms in November, which it looks as though the Democrats will lose the House and maybe even the Senate. So you'll have a Democratic president and a Republican Congress, maybe in both houses, that's a recipe for conflict and a recipe for sort of stagnation. Maybe you don't get a break in the deadlock until you have maybe a Republican president in 24. I think given where we are now, I mean, you came here on Sunday night, and then today we see what's happening in the British by-elections. Low turnout, the British by-elections, 50% and 37% turnout.
Wow.
I think even lower than usual. In the French election, national election, the second part of the election on Sunday when we arrived, 50% turnout. And as a result, the left and the right hold the balance. So Macron has to grovel in terms of a coalition, in either the left or the right, so the Greens or whoever it happens to be. So I think what happens in America on the basis of current knowledge is that a Trump or Trump lookalike looks the more likely, let's put it like that. I mean, on the assumption that Biden runs again, it's early days, maybe still, getting later in the scenario, but it's early days. So you have to see who emerges from a Democratic point of view. But if Biden runs again, I think President Trump couldn't forgive himself for not running. Then you have lookalikes like DeSantis. I mean, there is conflict and criticism from Trump of DeSantis, but it's likely, I guess, from what I see and hear, he's getting a lot of money, DeSantis, a lot of backing from business. And, American business, I mean, when you look at the stats, let's put the personal and political stuff and January the 6th to one side for a minute, if one possibly can. Probably from a personal point of view, you can't. But if you put that to one side, Trump has been good for business and good for the markets. And I think American business thinks that way generally. So I think the odds are, to your question, is he's got a good shot
Coming back.
either himself or a looker. And when you look at what's happening, I was in Brazil recently. You have Bolsonaro versus Lula, two extremes. You have Petro being elected in Colombia. So there are, there's a bit of a pink tide, as they call it, in South America. So I think it's from a political point of view, it's going to be quite bumpy. In the UK, it's going to be bumpy. I mean, the chairman of the Conservative Party resigned today after the two by-elections. He's a devotee of Boris Johnson. It goes beyond being a friend. I mean, he's totally dedicated, and I think has surprised a number of people. In his letter of resignation, if you read it once or twice, I mean, there's some things there. The sign-off line is, I will always be loyal to the Conservative Party. It's usual when you resign, you say, I will always be loyal to you as Prime Minister and the Conservative. So, interesting times. But I think from an economic point of view, we have to batten down the hatches, if I can put that way. And I don't think it's a short-term thing. I think this is a bit longer term until the political dynamics break the cycle. The other thing we've got to watch carefully, I mean, there are signs of recession already. So, for example, I listened to a market call over the weekend, every weekend, and last Sunday there were stats coming out of Australia, New Zealand and Canada on home sales and home prices going down quite substantially. A canary in the coal mine on recession. And there is some data, the PMI data coming out that there is a bit of weakness around. If the Fed and the central banks hold their nerve, they may start to waver because unemployment rises towards the end of the year. So I would expect to see interest rates maybe peak towards the end of the year and attitudes start to change. You get this split in policy between either maintaining full employment or price stability. We started on full employment because of COVID, and we now moved to price stability or trying to get it back, inflation off the agenda. Larry Summers says 5 years of 5% unemployment to do that. But and he's been right so far. But at some point in time, governments, particularly going into elections, and the central banks are going to worry about unemployment.
And how does that actually vote for this industry?
Well, it depends on what part of the industry you're in. If you're analog, it's trouble. If you're digital, it's less trouble and better. Because like it or not, and India is no different, the world is moving increasingly digital, 65% last year, 75% by 2025. So the digital tail is wagging the dog, or it's the digital dog now. And as long as you're positioned well in that area, I mean, I would say we look at three areas: content, digital content. We look at data and analytics and digital media, we take that as one. And then finally, digital transformation. And the other thing to say is, digital transformation becomes more important. The slower the growth is, or the more recessionary, the pressure to get greater efficiency and to improve systems intensifies. So I think, coming out of the war and coming out of this discussion we've had, I think at the end of the day, you come down to, if I take it in an investment sort of jargon, risk on would be North America, because it's still 24 trillion out of 90 trillion and it's the lead economy in the world. South America, tremendous tech talent and tremendous creative talent. You see it here at Cannes, but that is underappreciated. Yeah. We have 3,500 people out of 9,000 people in Latin America. So I think risk on there. Risk on in the Middle East. Oil price, commodity prices means Middle East is on fire. I mean, really strong and tremendously ambitious, not just in Saudi but other parts of the region. It's becoming increasingly important. A lot of global advertisers say, it's pretty small in the context of things. It may be, but it's really growing very rapidly. And parts of Africa. I mean, Africa is not easy for all sorts of reasons, of volatility, but I think parts of Africa. Then I think you go to Asia. Obviously, the issues or potential issues around Taiwan and security Taiwan or otherwise are worrying clients. And clients mainly, have China as their biggest market or the second biggest market or the third biggest market, and they want to expand, but they're a little bit nervous. Ironically, I think there's more wiggle room economically in China. I think when President Xi gets his third term and or life term, whatever, I think what will be interesting, it'll open up a bit more. I mean, he seems to be committed to 5.5% growth this year, although again, markets don't go along with that. But I think they'll open up the spigots once the Congress is out of the way towards the end of the year. So I'm sort of bullish on China in that sense. But I think clients are worried about investment there at the minute. That leaves, obviously the rest of Asia, India as an alternative to China.
Yes.
And huge opportunity, good tech, good creative, so big opportunity. Vietnam.
But I don't understand why India is always looked at as the opportunity label. We've been talking about India being an opportunity.
Well, it's
for
changed. No, you can't get away with that, Sonali. Things have mushroomed there. Maybe not as far as you would want or I would want. But it's on its way, and it's inevitable. And Prime Minister Modi has done, as we've discussed this before, has done a very good job in putting India front and center of the agenda. So I think India, I think Vietnam, I think Indonesia, I think Malaysia, the Philippines, all these markets are going to become increasingly risk on there. The big problem area is where we're sitting. Not just France, but Central and Eastern Europe. Obviously, the security issue there is huge. And that means uncertainty investment, and the rest of Europe, including the UK. I mean, I still include UK and certainly in my mind in Europe. So I think for France, for Germany, for Italy, Spain, and the UK, it's going to be tough stuff.
I want to dip.
And you've got one of the hedge funds, probably one of the smartest hedge fund investors, who's doubled up or doubled down in his shorting bet. Ray Dalio has gone short on European equities in big time. So, you've got investment professionals of the highest quality saying, Europe's in trouble.
I want to talk a little bit about Web3. There's been a lot of discussion of this Cannes. I'm unsure. I'm very confused about what people are making of it. But I just want to understand, has there been any sort of idea on this great metaverse that people are talking about in terms of monetization?
Yes, I mean, for us, as I said, it's probably 10% of our incremental revenue this year, about 30 to 40 million out of 300 to 400 million, but it's only 3 or 4% of the total of 1.2, 1.3 billion. Having said that, there are huge applications. in medical science and operations and training in training generally, pilots, training pilots on the metaverse. I mean, not just metaverse, just relax. It's physical as well, but so training and education. I was with a Brazilian education company. They train 500,000 high school and university students. We're talking about it this last week. The metaverse applications are huge. So as another channel of communication, huge opportunities there. Entertainment. We're doing the NBA games with Oculus and Verizon with the NBA, and we've done 56 games. I think it is over 3 seasons. Huge application in sports. Sometimes it's difficult because of the rights. I mean, I can only imagine what we could do with the IPL. I mean, was it 6 billion that's being pushed into the IPL over the next 5 or 6 years?
Yeah.
So sports, music, pop music, huge. Training, as I said, education and e-commerce. Those areas. So the e-commerce applications, metaverse stores, avatars where you try on clothing, shoes, whatever. Huge applications. So it is very sexy. It may, others have said it too, may be overhyped, but longer term, huge. And the training, it blows your mind when you see what's happening in medical operations and guidance for surgeons. Extraordinary. So I would not underestimate the importance of it. It may take a longer time. I mean, headwear and headsets, etc. There's some big advances. It's much easier to use than it was before. The other application, working from home. I mean, that's going to be really important.
That's great.
We're using it a lot already in our management meetings. It works for a significant period of time. It used to be, you couldn't have the headset on for longer than 5 or 10 minutes, but now you can take 2-3 hours and it works. So I think we're starting to see some lift.
So are you suggesting in a few years we'll have CAN in the metaverse?
Well, it raises the question about what are we all doing here? Well, we're all glad to see one another be back, and massive networking opportunity. But this thing probably costs about £100 million to put together, and it doesn't do a great job for the climate. So climate change. So it's the old story. So if we've spent the last 2.5 years adjusting to a different way of working, in our case probably hybrid working, where 60% of the space on a like-for-like basis is being used now as opposed to maybe even less than it was before, surely there must be a way of doing this differently. This is tech dominated. This is a creative festival driven, at best you could say, a creative festival driven by tech and data. You look at the Quasette. Amazon has a huge presence here this year. Apple on the fringes, but Google, Alphabet, Meta, huge presences here. So it's really become, as you said to me in the green room, if I can say this, if you don't cut this out, that it's a tech festival. It's sort of CES. It's interesting. CES has gone sort of more creative, and Cannes has gone more tech. And Roger Hatchwell, we were talking about this earlier today, who was the founder of this festival and sold it to it was a press group, I think at the beginning of the millennium, because originally it was a very sort of French creative festival, and it's become really a global. But it's quite interesting. It's sort of CES has moved to Cannes, and Cannes has moved more to CES. And when thinking about it, several people at the beginning of the week, we thought, if we were going to redesign it, what would we have done? Maybe done it regionally. Maybe had North and South America, or in Miami, and you cover both. Maybe in Europe, EMEA. Maybe even take the MEA bit and have it separate. And then Asia, maybe you would do it differently. Maybe you split Asia into a couple of regions, maybe even more. So maybe you would do it regionally, maybe pick different themes, but maybe have it much more flexible.
Okay, but I think a while ago you were actually questioning the relevance of Cannes.
Well, I think again, if you and I were sort of building it from scratch now, would we come up with this as the prescription. I mean, you know, it's a little bit with the world at war,
Yeah.
with climate change, with the economic pressures that people you know, I don't think pictures of people being turfed out of the gutter bar at 3 a.m. in the morning blind drunk is necessarily what we want. I mean, I went to a session here and two of the trade associations, one the agency trade association and the other a client trade association, were following me, and they were going to have a conversation about procurement, and we're sitting here with an event which is costing something like £100 million to put on.
Correct me, I'm very confused about this. I've seen everyone talk about how digital spends are the real thing. You know, the balance is definitely tilted. Analog is dying.
It's not dying.
No,
I mean, if you do look at the numbers, the projections, it's sort of flat. Some parts of it are up. You know, connected TV is, you know, the sort of linear revenge is around connected TV, and we are seeing some huge lift. I mean, some of the smaller, they are small scale, but some of the smaller companies in connected TV are growing their top lines by 100% a year, by triple digit. And one of the things that has happened, I think, is recently, you know, we had the sort of post-COVID coming out, if you like. No, we're not out of it, but sort of moving away from it. And I think what happened was that people felt maybe that they were spending too much on digital, and there was a little bit of a shift, and maybe pricing had altered, you know, lift on digital pricing, down on traditional. So there, I think over the last sort of 6 months or 9 months, there's been some evidence of traditional TV, for example, being stronger, related to connected TV and related to what I just said. So it's not dying. I think that's putting it too dramatically. Digital is still where people, you know, for example, you know, we talked about the metaverse, Epic Games and the Unreal Engine, you know, our studio in New Delhi. Huge opportunities as a result. Huge opportunities with TikTok. You know, Apple is building an ad platform. We calculate it's something like 10 billion of spend already. TikTok, you know, I've heard numbers. I was thinking it was 30 billion. I may be out by a factor of 100%. It may be as high as 60. I've heard numbers of 60 for TikTok. So I think you know, that clearly is a big change. So, you know, the sort of things you see Amazon building its. So I would say Apple is new, if you like, because of the IDFA changes. TikTok is new, and then you've got the metaverse Unreal Engine thing. It would be, I would say, new. Those three things are probably newer. Amazon, big presence here.
Yes.
For the first time, huge presence.
The whole port.
All right, you know, all guns blazing, and ad business was 30 last year, probably 40 this year, and then, you know, huge presence for Alphabet. You know, big the watch and the Pixel camera. I mean, all of this is hugely important. So you are seeing some very significant changes.
I do get a feeling from marketers that they're kind of tired of this tactical advertising, and you're going back to brand.
Well, I think that that's nice to believe. There was one FMCG person I met very early on who said, I'll come on to what I think is happening. Said he wanted to go to more brand awareness. His is a premium portfolio, and he's worried about moving up the funnel. I think as a result of all the uncertainty, let's put it as that for a minute, whether we call it recession or not, the uncertainty, there is a move down the funnel. Okay. There is a concern about measurement. There is a concern about media mix. You know, am I spending too much on analog or too little or whatever? There is a concern that agencies are not tech enough, and we hear that all the time. And we're positioned as a digital tech business, and you know, we tick that box. But there is real concern over it. Concern about hitting KPIs. And look, the simple truth, Sonali, is that clients don't tell you they're going to cut until they're 1 minute before midnight, or maybe even 1 minute after. They don't want to demotivate us and our people. The business is built on passion and engagement and involvement. And clients want to involve, you know, the good clients in particular, want to keep us motivated and want to keep us enthusiastic and dedicated. And if you're cutting back, pulling back the dial, obviously that doesn't do it. So I think we have to be a bit careful about that. I think Q2 actually, we were talking about it last night with a bunch of analysts. Q2 will be good.
Oh.
If you looked at BNP conference, there are 92 CEOs I think there, and there was an analysis. All the CEOs, bar a few, were optimistic, and I saw an analyst's note which suggested that Q2 would be 7% above in, I guess, sales and earnings estimates, because what we're talking about has not kicked in yet, and we may well start to kick in. But I would say the general thing that we're seeing is movement down the funnel to more about performance, more about measurement, more about media mix, more about, am I doing the right thing?
So advantage S4.
Well, I mean, we are further down the funnel, and we are very activation and performance orientated. So in theory, the other thing, of course, is we've got a tech services business. So anybody bent on transformation is coming our way. So all of that works, I think.
Oh, how do you critique your India presence?
Well, I think, it's, my grandmother said, and my mother said, good things come in little packages. So it's doing very well, but we're very ambitious, and you're ambitious for India. I'm ambitious for S4 and Media Monks in India. So we want more of it. But the answer is it's doing well. They're doing very well, but we want it to be more. It's part of this. It goes back to the geographical thing as well. I mean, if before the war, we were probably saying that we would be 40% North and South America, 20% EMEA, and 40% Asia. Now, I think probably you have to reassess that, given the security risks in Central Eastern Europe and the question marks, as I said, in Asia. And you probably get to sort of 60% North and South America, 20 EMEA stays the same, and 20% Asia. So the answer is, you want to double up. In Asia, we're 10% at the moment. You want to double up.
Oh, with what we've just spoken about is the fact that it is inevitable that times are going to get tougher. Businesses are going to come under pressure. Do you think the marketing departments of companies will have to, of course, also prove their reason to exist and to invest?
Well, we're already hearing that. I mean, we're already hearing that financial functions or CFOs, you have your budget, and if you want more for digital transformation or whatever, you have to demonstrate the returns. But it was ever thus. I mean, it was even in good times you have to do that. But probably the pressure intensified. No, we're going to have to. But I think people understand. I mean, the advantage of digital is it does tend to be thought of as being lower funnel and more performance orientated, and maybe that's its advantage. Maybe that's in evaluating the financial return or the measurement, it's probably easier. You have more data, you have more measurement. There's an argument sometimes that some of the platforms don't. But by and large, I think it's easier to demonstrate return on investment and return on the decision. But inevitably the pressure is going to intensify. The other thing is that's sort of interesting is we really look at the marketing function, the sales function, and the IT function. So content and data and digital media. Well, content hits marketing and sales. Data and digital media.
And digital transformation.
Yeah, and we'll come on to transformation. So they hit marketing and sales and a bit of the CIO. Transformation or technology services hits the CIO. So we hit all three functions. And the big challenge will be, how do you bring all those together if you're the client? So when you have a transformation project, it involves marketing, it involves sales, it involves IT, and you have to bring the three together in one big package. And that's where CEOs, for example, I think of a bank spends 10 to 12 billion a year, on IT. A lot of that IT hits you and me as consumers or customers, but it also hits the IT function. So integrating in that is difficult.
Fair enough. Last question before I let you
Sure.
go. How would you? I believe you're taking. I believe you're taking the weekend off in Cannes, and you're taking it easy.
You sneaky. I give you a bit of inside information. Yeah, go on.
Is that a change in attitude?
No, I happen to be in Cannes. I have a house near here.
Yeah, so you're relaxing. You're taking the weekend off.
No, it doesn't matter.
You are doing a
doesn't matter
business
where
meeting.
you are. I could be in Uruguay.
Fair enough.
Which would be nice.
I thought, with COVID, maybe you have decided to take it easy.
No, I think no, not that at all. I think COVID has changed habits. I mean, it's changed work habits, and I think it's changed people's. If our objective is net zero in 24, which it is, COVID, working from home, helped us because our two big carbon emissions are
That's
around
true.
travel and office, right? Office is 40% less than it was before on a like-for-like basis. Travel is less, but I think to answer your question, I think you're much more careful now, quite rightly, on choosing to travel. I mean, that's another thing about this. I mean, I don't know what the carbon emission is. I don't know how many private planes came in here. Any celebrity that comes in gets dinged for contributing, to talk about world peace and climate change, gets dinged for coming in their private planes. No, I think it has changed people's thinking about T&E. I mean, one of the issues are just finally, one of the things that happened was that companies actually during COVID, I mean, it's a bizarre thing to say because terrible thing to say in a way because so many people died as a result of COVID. But companies were better run.
Yes,
Yeah.
more efficient.
Less office. So margins actually expanded. What's happening now is, people are coming back to the office and they're occupying offices, so that office expense is up,
Yes.
travel's up, so that pressure is intensifying. That's one of the reasons why some of the analysts are concerned about marketing spend. That the margins, that any benefit you got gets removed,
Right.
and then that puts pressure on other cost centers.
I have a rejoinder to what you said about, saving the world. Look at the kind of explosion we've seen in e-commerce and just delivery systems. There's been an explosion in India. If there's an explosion in India, I'm sure the Western world is far superior.
Sure.
Everything is convenient, and the impetus came through COVID. And everybody here comes and sounds like an NGO, right? And not a brand, not for business, but they're saving the world.
No, we're doing it for the long term, Sonali. I mean, it drives me crazy when, everybody, it's very simple. I mean, John Brown summed it up in 1997, and he was running an oil company at that time. And he said, if you're in business for the long term, everything falls into place. So if you're doing things for the long term, you think about all the constituencies. It can be your people, it can be your suppliers, it can be the government, it can be NGOs, but it all fits together, and I think it's very simple. So long-term brand building is the key.
No, but I think brands are pretending to save the world.
There are some
Look,
examples.
I've become so lazy as a consumer. I don't even go down to buy vegetables, even if it's downstairs. I'm ordering it.
But you can sell a bad product or a bad service once. It was David Ogilvy who not with good politics, good current politics, said, consumer's not a moron, it's your wife. So it's consumer's not a moron.
No, my point is every time I order something, it's so convenient. Look at the carbon emissions there. The Amazons of the world and the other big.
This is going to be a big issue as we go into tougher economic times. Globalization, not out the window, but we've been used to, since I've known you, the world has been not tariff-free, but relatively tariff-free, barrier-free, very little friction. We've all benefited from global free trade and the growth of trade. That's not off the agenda completely, but that's going to be less. So when economic conditions get tougher, are we going to be able to pursue some of the things that we pursued before? And one of the things that people are going to come under, maybe this is a good thing, will come under increasing review, some companies have been criticised for being over involved in purpose.
Oh, levers.
Well, we know, and not just them, but one of their shareholders said the last thing you need was a mayonnaise with purpose. But I'm sure Nelson Peltz will sort that out.
Great. Thank you, Martin. This was absolutely delightful as usual.
All right, thank you,
I look
Sonali.
forward to your India trip. It's way overdue.
It is way overdue. Dead
Yes.
right. Yeah, we'll
And now that you've started
come and see you.
traveling, and you're taking weekends off, I think you should come to India too.
I'll take a weekend in India.
Fair enough. Lovely meeting you.
Kerala. We'll go to southern India.
Sounds good.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.